Hey, good morning, Calvary, and hope you're doing well. It's Tuesday morning, and I want to get after some of these questions that came in response to the sermon, and also wanted to share a verse that I've kind of had running through my mind here, just thinking about us as a church the last week or so. But Romans 15:13 says, "Now may the God of peace fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you may be filled with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." So as we think about all that's going on in the country, what's going on in our church, my prayer is that we would be filled with peace and we'd be filled with hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. So let's keep our eyes focused on Christ through all of it. All right, so I got 8 questions here to get through. And let's take them one at a time as they come. Here's the first one. How can I help be part of the solution to the harmful effect of political divisions on CMC? I've heard of churches forming gatherings of members representing both sides, led by a trained moderator, to look for common ground in a spirit of grace and unity. And so first, I really appreciate the question. I think that's the great spirit, or that's the right spirit in which to approach all these issues, is how can we be part of the solution to the harmful effect of political division? So part of that, I think, is one, just coming to a place where we don't want political division, right? We have political differences in terms of how we approach politics and the ways that our votes go and these sorts of things, but we don't want to lead, maybe it's a better way to say this, we don't want our political divisions to lead to spiritual division. That's the thing we don't want. And I appreciate kind of the suggestion or the word that's heard here about forming gatherings to kind of talk these things through, and I think that's a great thought. And we did something like this on the issue of race a couple years ago. If you might recall, we read a book together, the One Book, One Church. We read a book together, and then we had kind of a forum on a Saturday morning to kind of get in table groups and talk through questions related to what we had read, and then we kind of changed up the table groups so we kept getting different audiences. And I think something like that could be really helpful, even as it relates to issues of politics. Of course, it's difficult right now in the midst of all the quarantine and the COVID time, and so it's not something that we can very easily practically pull off. I'm a little hesitant to try to do something like that in a Zoom context. I think what makes that work is when we trust each other, we believe the best in each other, and we're really willing to listen and hear from each other. But I would say in lieu of being able to do that right now, because of just the realities of the COVID restrictions, I think I would just say get in relationship with people that view politics different than you, people that you trust, people that you respect, people that you admire, but then just talk with them, and ask them. And so maybe we can't formally do this as a whole congregation right now, but I think so often we get into, I said this a little bit last week in the Q&A, but we get into our echo chambers of our own ideas. We just talk to people who agree with us. We talk to people who see the world the way that we see the world, and they just affirm all of our presuppositions. And the only way we interact with the other side is by kind of reading about them or listening to them kind of from afar, but we don't actually get up close and personal with people who see the world differently than us. So I think this is important for us to continue to do as a church, that we not just kind of bifurcate into our own little parties based on political division, but that we really develop this spirit of unity and peace. And we listen to each other. We just genuinely listen to each other and hear what everyone's concerns are and the other side's concerns are on politics. And we humanize the conversation, rather than just kind of having it be kind of this cerebral thing without a real human element to it. Okay, this is a bit more of a comment, but I think there's a question in here. It says, "Thank you for your elegant explanation in today's sermon." Thank you for the thank you. Then I see your point about supporting politicians who mock the people we missionize. And then here's a comment. "Mocking is in the same category as his character flaws that you dismissed." And then he asks a question or makes a comment after this. Let me just say briefly, because I got a couple of comments about that I was kind of dismissing the importance of character as it relates to politicians. And I thinking back, I feel like I could have said that differently. I don't want to dismiss the importance of character. I think character is important, particularly as it relates to leadership and even political leadership. But what I wanted to say, one, I don't have kind of a utopian rosy view of politicians, that they're all going to be kind of flawless in their character. And I think more what I was trying to say is that that wasn't the driver in my comments in the past 2 weeks. So I don't want to dismiss those as irrelevant. That's not really what I was looking to do. More it's just kind of what was the driver, what was the motivator to say something. And it had more to do with this association with someone that is mocking the people that you're trying to share the gospel with. That was kind of the thing that was really kind of in my craw a little bit. And so I didn't mean to dismiss the character issues. I think character issues are important. And then this last kind of comment, I think a question here, but a comment. A far greater concern is a failure to speak the truth and apologize for untruth. And I think that's right and true, and it relates to, to all relationships. I think it relates to politics. Politics work because we generally trust the people in politics. Doesn't mean we trust them implicitly, but when a government loses, when a kind of government loses the trust of the people, that's when you start getting anarchy, right? So we don't have to trust them as though they're all saints, but like when we generally believe that like what they're doing is kind of what we're seeing. The deeper our mistrust goes into the political realm, right, the less willing we are to submit to the direction that they're bringing to the country. So I think truth is very important just for politics to actually work. So in any case, I'm not quite sure what the question is there, but I guess I just agree with the comment that is made. Okay, here's a fun one. All right, just gonna get the bugs out of the rugs on this one. This past Sunday, I tried to, sail the middle way, between the Scylla and Charybdis, in the Straits of Messina, and this person is not going to let me try to pick the middle way, right? So it's kind of an either or. So what if today, at the same time, there were 2 rallies scheduled in Oak Park, one to celebrate the life of MLK and racial equality, and the other rally to celebrate the sanctity of life in the unborn? How would you recommend that be handled? Like which rally should you go to? And there's a little bit like, which child would you, whose birthday party would you go to? Which child, kind of a thing, right? You're kind of forced to choose between the two. One, I would say go to both rallies. Start at one, finish at the other, and the other thing I would say practically with this is if it was like some sort of situation where we absolutely had to pick one or the other, you couldn't get to both of them before they were done. I would hope that we collectively as a church, we would split the difference, and half of us would go to one, half of us go to another, that we would represent, Calvary would represent at both concerns, right? That we wouldn't just all go to one or just all go to the other. But then having said that, I think the challenge, because that's probably how it would work at Calvary, right? The challenge there, though, to get back to the first question that was asked, is how do we do that in a way that doesn't lead to spiritual division amongst us, right? So it's not going to work really well for us as a church if, like, all the people that go to the MLK rally then judge all the people that went to the Sanctity of Life rally, and then vice versa, all the people that go to the Sanctity of Life rally judge all the people that went to the other one. And we just view the other side's choice in which rally they attended as kind of sub-Christian or lesser Christian. And the reality is that the rally question that's being asked here is it's the question that we're faced with in voting, because we don't get 2 votes. You have to vote for one or the other. Right, and right now you have to pick one or the other, and I have said, and I would continue to say in the same spirit of what you said, that like, politics are messy. It's difficult to know where to go. I don't judge people for the vote that they cast, and in the same way, I wouldn't judge people for the rally that they chose to go to. I would just ask that we would extend grace and the benefit of the doubt to the other person that went to the other rally. And recognizing that their choice to go to that rally or to cast that vote is driven by a Christian concern, like a legitimate Christian concern, and to assume the best in the other side. All right, which I'll say on that too it doesn't mean that everyone that goes to the rally on the other side or votes the other way is driven by the best or driven by Christian ideals. It's not, right? But when I look at my brother and sister on the other side, I assume that they are driven by Christian ideals. That's the point that I'm making. So, all right. Kind of connected here, next question. After connecting with our community in support of their values, and that's one point that I made in the sermon, right? That we need to start with continuity, where we share ideals, and then work to discontinuity. So after connecting with our community in support of their values, so like in Oak Park, that might be such as attending a rally against racism, when is it appropriate as individuals or as a church to do things or even organize things that are not valued by our community, such as attending or organizing a pro-life rally? And one, I would affirm that it is appropriate. So the question of, is it ever appropriate? Yes, it is appropriate. We don't want to just only embrace the values that our community embraces and ignore all the values, the Christian values, that our community is against, right? We want to hold the truth of God together, right? So we're gonna want to lean into affirming the values that our community values, and we're going to want to also figure out ways to affirm the values that our community may not share value with. So the question is when, and I think that that's just a question of prudential judgment and trying to figure out how to go about doing that. I think it's not only a question of when, but it's a question of also how, right? So, rewind, the clock 100 years, and there were things that our culture took as a default setting that were part of the Christian value system, and you had to think about how to carefully bring in the other values that our culture didn't share, right? So, and this goes, I guess, in kind of wherever you live. We live in Oak Park, so our cultural values are going to be leftist. So when and how do we affirm the values of the Christian values that are on the right? And I just think these are prudential, questions, and I don't know the answer to it. So I'm rambling around because I don't know. I don't really know exactly the answer, but I would just affirm that we do need to do that, and I think that needs to happen in the pulpit with preaching, but I think there are things outside of the pulpit too that can be done. So this is a question I've been thinking about the last probably 3 or 4 or 5 months. So pray for me on this one. Most of the discussion, well, let me back up. This was not part of this question, but we just had 2 questions about kind of rallies and organizational stuff. Let me just say this while I had this in my mind. Some of you on the political left would say, I'm pro-life, but I'm not going to go to a pro-life rally because the pro-life rally has a lot of associations politically that I don't want to get mixed up in. And some of you on the political right say, I'm all for racial equality, but I don't want to go to a MLK rally because they've got like Black Lives Matters and a lot of political associations that I don't want to get associated with. And I would just challenge us to see that we're both doing the same thing from the other side, right? So you may be right about not wanting to associate, and then the other way not wanting to associate. But just recognize that like there is there's kind of an equal sort of logic that is at work in the other side that's maybe at work on your side. And this is why I think we just need to be generous in extending grace to each other, because so often the errors that we see on the other side are present on our side too, and we just need to be sensitive to that, I think, and be respectful of other people and how they kind of view stuff, right? If you want people to give you the benefit of the doubt about why you do or don't do something, then give other people the opposite side the benefit of the doubt about why they do or don't do something. All right. Question 5. Most of the discussion during these 2 weeks relate to public corporate political activity. What about personal political conviction, voting that remains private? And I appreciate this question because I think most of my concern the past 2 weeks has been about like our public witness, and a little bit less about like what is the vote that I cast privately. And so I'm less concerned, honestly, I'm less concerned about like what you in the kind of quiet of your heart before God do with your vote. That's not quite so much the primary concern that I have as I think about kind of our gospel witness. I'm more concerned about sort of like the demonstrative sort of wear it on my sleeve Facebook, Twitter activity where everyone knows what your political allegiances are and the degree to which you kind of have put your heart into your political allegiances. That's the thing I'm more concerned about. So what about personal political conviction? I think that's between you and the Lord, and I think your voting that remains private, it doesn't as much bring Christ into the association with your political choice in that way. Number 6. This is more of a comment, but I think it's important, so I'm going to bring it out here. What is happening now with reference to COVID response, criticism of Trump, move to the political left, all of kind of the things that, and it's hard to know if this person is referencing the country or Calvary, but certainly the country, maybe also some comments about Calvary. Reminds me of when I lived in a communist country. And the reason, that's a comment, not a question, but the reason I want to bring it out here is I think this is an important thing for us at Calvary particularly to recognize. We have people at Calvary who used to live in communist countries and got out of communist countries by fleeing, right? So I mean, like, I don't know that those of us who have grown up in American democracies really appreciate how difficult it is to live in an oppressive communist country and to have to flee with your family or to be to fear imprisonment because you're a Christian. So the reality of communism, like if you have a history, and some of us do at Calvary, have a history of like coming out of communism and into American politics, anything like that significantly colors the way that you view the political landscape around you, right? And so things that start to politically, that start to remind you of the sort of practices that were taking place in the oppressive communist country in which you used to live. I mean, that is legitimately going to trigger you and remind you of the trauma that you've experienced. So if you're on the political left and you're like, I just can't believe anybody has any problem with anything on the political left, I just would say you're not taking seriously the dangers of the political left as they express themselves in their most extreme forms in communism. Communism is the political left run rabid. It's not to say that everything's going on in the political left in America is going to end up in communism. That's not the point that I'm making. But I will say we all should be aware of the trajectories that our political leanings will take us if they're not anchored in the gospel. And the political left, if it's not anchored in something, some transcendent truth of God, does end up in communism. Just like the political right, if it's not anchored in the truth of God and his redemptive grace, it ends up in fascism. So there are trajectories that are in play here. And I think we just need to be sensitive when we see someone in our congregation getting really nervous about the trajectories that are at play. I think we need to just need to be sensitive and honoring to that reality, right? And appreciative of the background that people have come through. So I don't have an answer or even counsel for this person except to say that, like, I hear you in that, right? I recognize, like, if you've come out of a communist background, like, I get why a lot of this can be very anxiety producing. And let's just collectively be sensitive to folks in that context. All right, number 7. In your sermon, you talk about voting, and we are to cast our vote not for what is best for America, but what is best in the best interest of the church. What about representatives who serve in Congress and who are sent to cast their vote for what's in the best interest of the church? I think the question is, what about Christian representatives who serve in Congress and who are sent to Congress to cast their vote for what's in the best interest of the church? Okay, so the point here, I don't know that we've got politicians here in our church, right? But I think this really is probably why the early church wasn't very excited about Christians getting involved in the political machinations of the empire. Because it just becomes, it's complicated. We're having lots of conversations. It's complicated about even how to vote, right? Like what social media use should be. It gets more complicated when it's your job, right? So now you have to ally yourself publicly with one party or the other. You have to advocate. There's just a lot of things that are complicating about a lot of this stuff. And I would just say, that in the early church, there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for, like, from bishops and whatnot in the early church to get involved in the political machinations of the empire. And I think God calls Christians to the political sectors, but I think you have to be very careful if that's the calling that the Lord has put on you, that you are clear in your own mind what it means to be loyal to Christ in relation to be loyal to the particular party that you're working in. So, in any case. And then the last question. On Sunday, you said that the church has always stood for equality of the races. Historically, this isn't true, though, right? I'm no historian, but weren't many of the folks who bought and sold slaves identified as Christian? And this is it's a great question. And I had said on Sunday, if you remember, I said that racism has been around as old as human history, and so has abortion, that both of these realities have been around for as long back as we can remember, Greco-Roman Empire and earlier. So, but that Christianity, with the dawning of the New Testament, has consistently been against abortion, it's been pro-life, and it's been against ethnic divisions and racism. So I should have said, though, I could have said more carefully, that the New Testament, Jesus in the New Testament and the apostles, like what is kind of put into our founding documents, are against racism. But the reality is that the church has been complicit in racism, all throughout our history. Right? So the church doesn't always live up to its ideals, not just on race, but on all sorts of issues, right? So if you're judging Christianity's stance on race in relation to its track record, it's not that great. But if you're judging Christianity's stance in relation to race with respect to Jesus' teachings and the founding documents, the New Testament, then it offers a radically inclusive ethic. And so we as a church, Calvary, but then more broadly, like the church more broadly, is striving to live into the ideals that are represented in our founding document. So I would not want to be understood as saying that the church has been spotless on this issue. So, all right, that's what I got. And you guys have a great rest of the week. We're taking the week off of politics, not just the week, but next Sunday we've got a new sermon, getting into the Sermon on the Mount. So excited to be doing that. And I know this past couple weeks hasn't been easy for some of you. It's for some of you, I think you've been very encouraged. For some of you, you've not been very encouraged, and I'm sensitive to that reality. And I would just ask that all of us would be prayerful, right, about how we can continue to lean into what God is calling us to be and to do. And I don't pretend to think that I've said everything right or that I've made all the right moves the past couple weeks. I want to leave room for not being perfect, for sure. And but you take it to heart as best as you're able, and as the Lord guides you and leads you. And let's keep coming together in love for Christ and love for each other, and we'll keep moving forward. So, all right, I love you all, Calvary. Take care and have a great week. Bye-bye.